Crystal says, hello, mister. I bought a brand new Mercury 150 EFI 4-stroke and it won't start. When I put the key on start, there is an electric click sound and the starter does not work. You can hear the fuel pump, but that's it. Did you know what the problem is? The battery is also brand new, 100 amp hour, 850 amps. Thank you for giving your opinion. Answer. So this clip is brought to you by PartsView.com. Check them out using the link and discount codes in the description below to save money on your boat and engine parts. Depends when we're talking about a starting unit. So if it clicks, then that you know that the control side is working and the relay is starting to go. But you are going to have to do some testing to figure this out. First thing that I would do is take a load tester, since you got a brand new battery, but there's so much stuff in between from your battery to the engine starter. There's a lot of components. You've got a battery switch. You've got, you got a cable from the battery to the battery switch with 2 ends on it that could be bad. You got a battery switch that could be bad. You got a wire that goes from the battery switch back to the engine that could be messed up. And then you have a wire that goes from, the stud where the battery cable connects on the engine up to the starter. On that 150, I think the battery cable comes in and goes straight to the starter, so you can forget about that last one. But either way, process is the same. You still got a lot of cables and the battery switch in between the starter and the battery. So what you need to do is get a load tester and hook it straight to the starter where your load cables, the big cables that are going, into the engine and hooking to the starter, clamp it to the starter and the ground, hit it with a load tester and see what happens. If you hit it with a load tester and that voltage drops to nothing, then your problem isn't your starter and it isn't your starting system per se as of right now. You have a problem with getting power to the starter where, you might have a bad battery switch. You could have a wire that's busted. You could have a loose connection on the battery switch. So definitely always start with that before you go just condemning a starter. Because if you're turning the key, you go to start, fuel pump's running, so your PCM's up, and then you go to start and you just hear it clicking. The relay is clicking. That means it's telling that solenoid on the starter to open up and let that power hit the starter. But if nothing happens, you most likely don't have any power there at the starter, so that's why it's not going to do anything, because it doesn't have any power. The relay is just a control side that controls the larger cables, the high output or the high amp draw of, the starter. You've got a relay with small wires that control that system. So I would troubleshoot that first. Seeing it's a brand new engine, then most likely it doesn't have a bad starter right out the gate. Most likely you do not have, you got probably a loose connector on the back of the battery switch, or one of the battery cables is messed up, or the ground isn't hooked up all the way, something like that. Loose connection, that'd be my first thought, and most likely the issue when it comes to a starting issue on a brand new engine. Now, starters can be bad out the box, so there is that, but check to make sure you got power to run that starter before condemning anything else. PF Publius. There's a good chance my till and trim was in water. I'm concerned that I might find some corrosion inside the pistons. You mentioned that not a lot truly goes bad on these, but I'm curious, what would give you pause on the internals apart from what you mentioned about the rams being nicked? So again, we're talking about trim units and the inside. If you get water inside the unit, like I said, there's not a lot that goes bad in them. There are little balls inside of the trim unit with springs behind them. They are valves, basically. They're passageways. And if you have water inside the trim unit, then those can rust, because now you have these metal components. They're springs and little balls that are polished to fit in an orifice and block fluid to run in different directions based on how you're trying to operate the trim unit. So those would be my only concern. Other than that, flushing, getting all the water out of it and filling it up, that's kind of the basic concerns with a trim unit is that, as long as you got no nicks on the rams, that's going to allow water in and fluid out. But if there was a lot of water in there, I would be checking those springs and stuff to make sure that none of them are rusted or, getting stuck, because if those little balls get rusted, they can stick in place, which is going to make the unit not work properly. But you have to take it all the way apart, clean everything, and make sure that there isn't anything rusty in there. If there's no rust on anything and everything looks good, then there's not, like I said, there's not a whole lot. Trim unit's just a hydraulic pump, so it's very, very basic. There's not a lot, fluid goes this way or fluid goes this way. That's that's kind of it. So yeah, it's a very simple system. Cameron Wenzel, what would be your recommendation to do a 300-hour 96 Saltwater Series 2? So we're talking about a 300-hour service, I'm guessing, or a 1996 Saltwater Series that has 300 hours on it. I picked up on a Hughes impeller and thermostats. Guy bought it from the second owner and didn't know the service info. Also ordered a paper manual to use. Screw online manuals. It's a 150. The oiler works, but they were still running premixed. On an OX66, I would be wanting to run the oil system that's on it. That's a really good system from Yamaha, probably one of the best out there for the two-stroke oiling system. It's very simple. I understand, we made that video. If you haven't seen it yet, check that out on how that system works. But the electrical side of it is the main concern. If like a sensor goes bad or a harness or something like that, the pump can fail on the remote oil tank. But by and large, if one of those components fails, sometimes they can get expensive, and that's why a lot of people will skip that and premix it. But on an OX66, I would try and use the oil system on the engine itself. Now, as far as the service goes, if it's new to you, for me, rule of thumb, by and large, when I buy something like that, unless I know 100% that everything got serviced, and depending on who did the service, I try and just do a service on the thing right then and there. That way, 100%, because you're buying it brand, to you, think about it like it's brand new to you, and you want to make everything set, so that way you're ahead of the game. You want to change the lower unit oil, pressure test the gear case to make sure it doesn't have any leaks, as well as inspect the seals on the lower unit, change your oil filters, inspect your spark plugs, inspect the thermostat, check the anodes. I would just go through and do an inspect/replace, do a full 300-hour service on it just to make sure everything is good. Make sure it has the right spark plugs in it, the right thermostat, because you don't know, what someone else has done. So for me, when I get a new engine, I try and go through it, visual inspection, and then do a full service. So that way, 100% on this day, this many hours, boom, I'm starting from scratch. I know everything's done, and I know it's all done right. Everything is greased. Everything is, lubed down. You got CRC on the engine. Everything's clean, and it's you're starting basically from scratch. That's the way I look at it. That's what I would do. But, as far as necessities, to me, that's what I would do, because I want to know what's up with the engine before you go out and start thinking and using it for long trips and stuff. You want to be, make sure your reliability's on par. So if you like this clip, you can watch the full podcast over here, or you can watch another clip over here.